So in 2019, I was correctly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It is an autoimmune condition. So no amount of pills were ever going to help me. I passed out in my bathtub. When I woke up, we know it was only by the grace. I didn't know where I was. And I remember seeing the ceiling and then feeling really cold. And then I realized that I was in a cold tub of water, but I had went down in a hot bath. And so I went to the ER, and at the ER, um, I got there. When I got there, I was actually in a wheelchair because I couldn't stand. My body was shutting down. And the triage nurse, she looked at me and she said, "How long have you had diabetes?" And I looked at her and said, "I don't have diabetes." And she looked at me and said, "Yes, you do." And I said, "No, I don't." And so me and her went back and forth with this a little bit. "Yes, you do." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "No, I don't." I said, "I don't even know anybody with diabetes." And so she had pricked my finger and she held the glucometer up and she said, "With a number like this, 597, not only do you have diabetes, but you're going into a coma." And that was the first time. I had been to the doctor twice with my symptoms. That was the first time I had heard diabetes. So I spent 6 days in the hospital trying to understand what that meant. Nobody in my family has diabetes. I was kind of clueless, learning all this on my own. And so being in what is called DKA, diabetes ketoacidosis, that's where I was. I was in a deadly state. Being there and having them bring me out of it really was like part of my education. uh, like instantly at the ER. That was when I was diagnosed. 2011, they told me I had type 2 diabetes, and I lived that way for 8 years. Fast forward, I go into DKA again. But this time, I know the symptoms. This time, I'm looking good. I started losing weight again. My friends were like, "Girl, you look good." And I said, "No, I look sick." And I had asked my doctor, like, I might not have type 2 diabetes. I might have type 1 diabetes. Can I be tested for type 1 diabetes? And the doctor said no. And I had asked again, and the doctor said no. And at some point, I was asking every 3 months to be tested for type 1 diabetes because the medication that they were giving me, it wasn't working anymore. I could tell. You know how they tell you to eat right? They take your grits away and stuff. And so I was down to just collard greens. I was eating my grandma collard green without the cornbread. You know what I'm saying? Said, "Y'all my people. We want cornbread with our collard greens." This is what I'm saying. Oh, so I was just down to collard greens and air, and my blood sugar was still going high, and I knew something was wrong then.
That's wow. Yeah, all you can say, right? Um, yeah, still here, right? Absolutely, yeah. Melissa, I think what you've just captured there really highlights what you certainly talked about as well as how difficult it can be to really vocalize your needs, particularly as a person of color and even a woman of color, right? Can you talk a little bit about more about that? What that means to you?
I can. I grew up in the South. We didn't question authority. We just, whatever the adult said is whatever the adult said. And you better not fix your mouth like you about to talk back. And so I know they got some positive parenting brochures in the room over there. I went and grabbed me one because I said I'm ready to whoop. The lady said, "No, no, no, take a pamphlet." Okay, I got a pamphlet. Um, but I say that to say because that's how we were raised, that's also how we deal with our doctor's appointments, right? The doctor is the person that knows everything and is just telling us and we're gonna do what the doctors say. And so when they told me I had type 2 diabetes, I did what the doctor said. I didn't even know that there was a type 1. I didn't know that it was possible to be misdiagnosed. And so with that, I had to find my voice. I had to ask, is the treatment that you're giving me the only treatment? We should have options. I tell people all the time that I want my diabetes care like I like I get my birth control. So I have a daughter and I'm one and done and I want to stay one and done. I got it right the first time. And so when I had my appointment with my gynecologist about that, they said, what kind of birth control do you want? Do you want a pill? Do you want a shot? Do you want an IUD? Do you want this? But when it comes to my diabetes care, I don't see the spread. I'm just told this. And so I have learned now to ask questions. Is this the only treatment? Is this my only option? What would you give your mama? You know, that's it, right? And so I wish I had that in the beginning. And that's the thing when you first diagnosed with something, it's the first time you're a patient. You don't know how to be a patient. You don't know if you can speak up. And so I had to learn, and I'm very thankful for being persistent because I had asked the doctor, can I be tested for type 1? No, you can't be tested. Then the next 3 months, I asked, have I been tested? And then my doctor looked and said, no, you haven't. And I said, okay, well, since I haven't, can I? And I was still denied. I asked the second opinion. You know, that's what they take. Go get a second opinion. Second opinion said, no, you have type 2 diabetes. And so it's been a long, frustrating journey to find my voice and to advocate. So, if anything, I would say to us, especially as Southerners and Southern women, we have to be impolite sometimes.
Let's let's shift to, I mean, very profound points. Let's talk a little bit about your support system throughout this journey, right? Can you share a little bit more about what that's looked like for you? You mentioned at the time being the only person in your family, right, being diagnosed with diabetes. How difficult has this been for you? But I'd love to just explore more what your support system has looked like throughout this.
Um, so when I was diagnosed, um, correctly, like first of all, when I found out I was misdiagnosed and questioning things, I thought that this happened to people that didn't advocate for themselves. I had started advocating for myself. I thought maybe this happened to other people. I thought the physicians would recognize that it's two doctors in the room. But I realized that my PhD didn't save me. And I was looked at not as the human being that I am, not as the intelligent woman that I am. I was just looked at as a Black woman living with obesity, got meat on your bones. So therefore you're this. And so I struggled to find a support because I am the only person in my family with type 1 diabetes. I have punks on me and they beef and stuff. So I'm the only one at Thanksgiving beefing. um, but I have found support online. I found support through Facebook groups. I first found support. There was this on meeting group. They met once a week in Fayetteville. I had found that group, and I remember walking in there, and they were going around the room saying their name, and they got to me, and I said, "My name is." I said, "Oh, come on now." And so I had shared with them like this was the first time I was in a space with other people with diabetes, other people that had to check their blood sugar. Um, And so it was actually a woman in that meeting that said, I was in the ER that day and they took you ahead of me. She said, "You were dying, and I seen it." And so having that group there and having online, having to teach my family what I can and cannot do. When you got little kids, they food pushers. They don't eat all their macaroni and cheese and they want you to eat it. You know, mommy, this is, so I'm struggling, with that too. But my family, they've learned how to be a support, and the online support from random people that are also living with the condition has been helpful.
Let's talk a little bit about representation. From your perspective, how does the lack of representation impact the education and awareness of the disease and really understanding the burden of this disease on the community?
The lack of representation is significant when I'm at type 1 diabetes forums and conferences and events. I am the fly in the buttermilk. But I'm going to tell you something. I think a lot of us are misdiagnosed because I was misdiagnosed for 8 years. And what ends up happening is the medication doesn't work anymore. The working out doesn't work anymore. And then now you're labeled uncontrolled. Now you're labeled non compliant. They throw these labels on you. And I'm going to share there was a relative in my family that passed away from complications of diabetes. And I often wonder if he had type 1 because he had gone through a phase where none of the medication was working. And then he went through a honeymoon phase. So typical with people with type 1, they have this what's called a honeymoon phase where you don't need insulin. But then you will need it. It's just like this, like, I don't know, it's kind of strange. I had this honeymoon phase for like 2 years. So I got diagnosed, and then for like 2 years, I didn't need insulin. It's called the honeymoon phase. Well, when he went through the honeymoon phase, he told the whole church God cured him. And we all shouted and tore up the church. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we had our tambourines and the bass drum. Come on now. And we was all happy. And he was a deacon in the church, and he got up there and testified. But then when that honeymoon phase ended, and he needed insulin, he refused it because for him, taking that insulin meant God didn't cure him. Come on. And so watching my cousin pass away from that, because he really struggled with that, it made me, when I was diagnosed, really understand what it means to be healed in a way that we talk about healing. Because when we have diabetes, especially type 1, you got it for the rest of your life right now. We're very hopeful that will change. And so I had to understand that even in my diagnosis, I'm still healed.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's powerful. Yeah, that's powerful. In terms of the burden of disease, obviously we recognize the clinical, there's a burden there. You've spoken to many of these throughout your journey as well, but can you talk a little bit about the other burdens that have impacted you? I mean, it's financial, psychological. Just curious to what's impacted you as throughout your journey with type 1.
I'm going to tell you one, I didn't know diabetes was this expensive. The management of diabetes, how expensive it is, I learned the night I was discharged from the hospital because they had given me a little brown bag of stuff. And when I got home, I was discharged the afternoon, so I got home kind of around sunset, and I was looking for, they gave me a insulin pen, but no needles. And they gave me the glucometer with no strips. And so I was like, but in the hospital, they put a thing on this and they gave me insulin or whatever. So I just went to the pharmacist and I was like, hey, I need needles and I need strips. And the lady was like, that'll be $89.99. And I was like, maybe that's the CVS price. So I went to the Walgreens, same price. So the night I was discharged, I learned how expensive it is. And I tell you, one summer in Fayetteville, I rode around with no AC. because I couldn't afford to get my air conditioner fixed and pay for my diabetes supplies. That's the situation I was in. Professor DeRose, no AC in the car. So it's the financial burden, it's the burden of being by myself, it's the burden of the everydayness of it, it's the burden of wondering if I'm gonna pass out again in my bathtub. That's real scary for me. So it's the psychological burden. It's the burden of cooking the food for me a little bit different than my family. Because they tell you cook one meal and force them to eat them, but they don't have my 9-year old. Um, so she's not having it. She's just not at vegetables right now. So yeah, it's all of those burdens that go into it. Even flying here, going through TSA with the devices and stuff, and then they want to touch on you just to get through security. So it becomes a lot that I deal with.
So you're very involved in this type 1 diabetes space, the advocacy space. Let's talk a little bit more about advocacy and what this means to you in terms of the work that you're doing.
Um, so I told y'all when I was diagnosed how I had passed out in my bathtub. What I didn't tell you is 61 days after I had been diagnosed, I lost my home in a tornado. Y'all remember 2011? Them tornadoes was just sweeping through. Yep, they got me. And so there I was. I had just stopped crying every day about diabetes. And then I was on my way home. And then something, and I say something because we know how we do. We say, something told me to turn into the store. And I had never felt that. So I listened. So I turned into the store. And then when I got in there, I said, I don't even know why I'm here. I just felt something told me to turn into the store. So about 10 minutes later, I get out because, whatever, I got a car full of groceries. And I had just missed the tornado. Just missed it. So why am I on this stage? I'm on this stage because I know my life was spared for a reason. And that reason, I make it to tell people about type 1 diabetes, to tell people to make sure they are not misdiagnosed, to tell people to take care of themselves even when you don't want to. You can still have a little bit of cornbread, just might not be as much as you want, but take care of yourself. So that's my advocacy. My advocacy is to let Black people know that we still have a lot of life to live, and we got to live it. We got to live it. So that's my advocacy.
I love that. I love that. So as we're coming up on time shortly, we're sitting here at this incredible conference that's convening people on a number of important topics that impact our community. What is your call to action for this audience here today? Is there a call to action?
Yeah, my call to action would be to make sure you're aware of what is out there. Make sure you're aware of all the treatment options that are out there. There are treatments coming down the line. When I think about when I was first diagnosed, there was maybe 4 different options. Now there are like 6, 7 different options. So if you were diagnosed with something a while ago, ask your doctor, have there been any new treatments that make things better? For example, when I was diagnosed, I had to give myself insulin injections sometimes 10 times a day. And I was all bruised from the multiple injections. And then now I wear an insulin pump. I put the thing on and I don't have to prick myself for 3 days. But that's new technology and it has changed my life. So that would be my call to action is to just be aware of what's new out there. because we have people working at various companies designing new products to make our lives better and to see if maybe it'll work for you.
That's powerful. Is there anything else that, as we're coming to a close, that you'd like to share with the audience?
Um, I think if there's anything I would like to share, it would be if you know somebody in your life that is living with diabetes and you have said to them things like, you ain't doing right, things like, you know you shouldn't be eating it. Just know that there aren't a lot of conditions that you have to think about every time you eat. But for those of us who are living with diabetes, we have to think about diabetes every time we eat. So be gentle on us because it's a burden, it's tiresome. Sometimes we just want the sweet potato pie. We do. We just want it. And we want it in peace. We don't need to hear you nag at everything. Now, after we eat the pie, say, come on, let's go for a walk. Walk with us. Don't tell us just to do it, even if it's just to the mailbox and back. Come on, let's go around the corner. You know, I actually um, go walking sometimes at the store. I go in the grocery store and I'll do one lap before I start shopping because it's safe. If I fall, somebody gonna help me up. It's lit. You know what I'm saying? Because we know that everybody can't walk at the park. Now let's just tell it. So where can you walk? Where can you get exercise? So I just want to say that as a person living with diabetes, having to think about where my blood sugar is every time I eat, please be gentle on the relatives that you have who are living with diabetes because we need love and we need to sometimes just eat the pie.
I love that. I love that. So we're almost at time. So I know Dr. DeRose is going to be around after this session for anyone that wants to talk to her and maybe have some questions about her journey. But I just want to take this brief time to Dr. DeRose, Felicita, thank you so much for your advocacy, for your story here today. There's so many words I think right now when I'm thinking about you and what I've read about you and what you've shared in this conversation today, but bravery, courage, and strength. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I appreciate being able to sit on this stage with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.